Hello and welcome to our Business Roots chat. Today I'm with Christo Hudson from the Black Box Approach. Hi Christo, how are you?
I'm great, thank you Matthew, thanks for having me along.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So, Black Box Approach, tell me about it.
What I do is I train people and organisations how to have those conversations that normally in the workplace we shy away from.
Okay, like what? Give us an example.
So anything to do with people's mental health really, running from webinars and workshops to formal training in suicide prevention, anything to do with what goes on in people's minds.
And do you think people's mental health is still a bit of a taboo subject?
There's more of a light that's been shone on it quite more recently. I think people are understanding that our health plays a massive part of us and how it affects us in the workplace. We used to shout about health and safety and the safety bit, but I think we're starting to realise that how people show up really affects the bottom line eventually.
Okay, and how did you get into this?
Where do we start? Well, I started running a business out of necessity. Many people that you probably meet don't go that route. They probably start a business because they wanted to. I did it out of necessity. I had a bit of a life-changing redundancy, which drove me to try and find a way to support my family. And on that route, there were certain hurdles in the way that got me to do what I do. But I wanted to do something that I enjoyed and actually helped other people. Okay,
well, it's kind of a very honourable kind of route there. Now remind me, how many children have you got?
4, that's why I look like this.
Exactly, so yes, you got 4 children, so that the necessity to actually support that fairly large family was quite gripping, I suppose.
Yeah.
And you must have gone through some struggles and challenges yourself at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pre-lockdown, when I lost my job and the world became a very dark and lonely place. Lots of wonderful people around me supporting me and telling me I was doing a great job, but inside it didn't feel like that. And I found this route, something that I had to do really. And it finds me sitting here with you. I do struggle with running a business, but I love what I do, so that's a bit of a fine balance.
Well, exactly. If you can find that, then that's a good thing. And so, just before lockdown was when you set up the business. So you're 3 years old as far as the business is concerned.
Yeah, just coming up 8th of March 2021. No, it's January 2021. Yeah, it's been a bit of a whirlwind.
So, and any successes?
That's a really difficult question. I still have my house, and the children get fed.
What more do you want?
That's how I see
fundamentally,
it.
That's
fundamentally.
When you talk about the necessity, that's kind of where you need to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and the next step is to grow that business and make it, because it's, as you say, it's an honourable thing. It's a fairly unexpected position that you're in.
Yeah.
However, you're doing some good. And is that the way that the clients kind of respond to you? Do the clients feel that you're doing some good in their organisations?
Yeah, they do, and that's actually part of the reason I keep doing it. I always, whenever I deliver a course, whether it's to do with mental health or suicide, I always place this bet with them that one of them will come back to me within 48 hours saying, I've used those skills, maybe I didn't have the knowledge and the skills before the course, but now I've had and they've used them. And for me, that kickback, that, some people say it's quite selfish, but there is this helper's high.
Yeah.
And the kickback you get when I know that someone is in a safer space as a result of that training, I'm like, you just can't beat that.
Well, it's a good helper's high, but also, I mean, you're being humble here a little bit. You're probably saving people's lives, right? And I know it's probably a hard thing for you to accept or admit or say on camera, but it's probably a truism if you're really honest with yourself.
I really hope it is.
Yeah.
But it is really difficult. I mean, the subject of suicide, I tell you, when you're a pilot, everyone wants to be your mate. You can imagine what it's like, hey, you're the pilot. When I tell people I work in suicide prevention, you should see the physical recoil.
Oh, really?
Oh, you could empty a dance floor instantly. You could go to a wedding and they're like, oh, what do you do now? You still flying planes? And I'm like, nah, what are you doing? Well, I support people that, and I train people in the world of mental health, and people are like, don't speak to this guy. Where's this conversation going? And that is, I really struggled, even being asked the question is, what's your title within running a business? And I kind of, a little bit inside me just cries and goes, what? I don't know how to run a business. But it's still a really difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself in this world of that is really dark for some people, and what I do is just try and shine a light on the subjects that people tend to shy away from.
Yeah. Now, so you mentioned being a pilot, and obviously I know your background. Tell us a little bit about that redundancy. So where were you made redundant from?
Yeah, so it's funny. They always say, "How do you know there's a pilot in the room?" Because they tell you.
Yeah.
So I used to work for Flybe Mark 1.
Yeah.
And I worked out of Edinburgh Airport despite the English accent. I've been in Scotland for 23 years. I worked out of Edinburgh for coming up for 13 years. And a lot of, when you speak to a lot of businesses, they go, well, it's a family. We work as a family. And everyone's like, that's a bit weird, right? My family doesn't work. I couldn't run a business with my family like that. But it genuinely was. We would meet as a crew before a flight. Mm-hmm. We would go off round Europe, go to some weird and wonderful places, probably delayed, probably carry a sick bag at some point during the day. And there were things that went wrong and things that went right, but we genuinely did it all together. And that was magical. Mm-hmm. My role there was as a training captain, so I was teaching new pilots and experienced ones how to fly these planes and land them in airports around the UK and Europe. And there was this sense of me training people and passing on that knowledge that, I don't know, I just loved it. But part of my role within the last few years was I was known as a flight data monitor. Mm-hmm. Now that doesn't sound very glamorous, but when you talk about black boxes, that's what people understand. So I was looking at lots of data sent from the aircraft and trying to work out what was really going on behind the flight deck door. There reams and reams of data, and there were evidence of trends and some incidents going on, and trying to understand why as humans we behave in a certain way. Mm-hmm. Most organisations, expect you to leave everything from your personal life at home. Yep. And when that flight deck door closes, we leave it there, and then you have to operate the aircraft. And people, you just can't do that. You know?
Is this what the airlines refer to as human factors?
Absolutely. Yeah. So human factors and been studied within aviation for the last, what are we looking at, 70s, 50 years or so, understanding why we behave in certain ways. So I was doing that, having these conversations with crews and just trying to work out what was really going on, because you can only tell, you can't get a whole picture from data. Mm-hmm. So these conversations of why people were working like that. And I was in Manchester Airport, and I've kind of rambled, but I was in Manchester Airport ready to come home, and I was actually training someone who'd previously been made redundant from another airline 18 months beforehand. And there was this just really spooky atmosphere that night. Something just wasn't right. And we were ready to come home. This time we were on time, fuel on board, bags on board, passengers ready to come. It was Friday night. And we just had our fourth baby. I was ready to come home. Life was really good. And a very official looking man with a high visibility jacket. Oh, that's when someone's got a high vis jacket on. Yeah. So he came over with an A4 piece of paper and some masking tape. Like that was going to stay on at 25,000 feet. And the piece of paper said the company's gone into administration. Index, you are done.
So that was it?
That was it. In Manchester. I live in Edinburgh.
Right.
What? I don't want. What? What's going on? So that was it. Cabin crew, passengers, and I was trying to hold.
So the aircraft just didn't take off.
Oh well, no. So the story goes, we were sat there. It was an 8 o'clock departure. We were told, all the aircraft were then impounded in Manchester. So we were in contact with air traffic control, and I was like, well,
did they think you were going to nick it?
Well, so what they do is they start parking big John Deere tractors behind the aircraft.
So you can't
move
off to Cuba.
Absolutely. So they put they start blocking them in. I was speaking to air traffic control, and I was like, they have an issue that we have all these aircraft out of base with all these passengers on board. As soon as they impound those aircraft, those passengers and those aircraft are the airport's problem. Yeah. Or the CAA's problem. So we had this dialogue, and eventually they let us go. So we flew back to Edinburgh, and we were met with another very official-looking man with
An even brighter high.
Even brighter. We've gone from yellow to orange now.
That's very dangerous, yeah.
and that was it. We got home, we weren't allowed into our crew room, passengers got off, and still this demeanour of everything's going to be all right. And inside there was this churning. Got home, my wife, she'd heard the news, and she met me and she's like, "You all right?" "I'm fine." Smiled, "I'm fine." And for the next 6 months I thought I was fine. And that's when the world got very dark. Even though I was surrounded by really wonderful people that cared for me and loved me, lockdown happened. But because lockdown happened, there was no furlough for us because we'd been made redundant before the system got put in place. I went on to job seekers allowance, which took a very long time to come through, and very nice house, very nice lifestyle for very hungry kids, and nothing coming in. No savings to burn through, no nothing. And my life, having been driven from the passion of what I wanted to do, suddenly got flipped onto this, oh my goodness, I need to really focus on, I have to get money in to survive. And I'd never really thought about things like that. That's where I really started to struggle. And despite being surrounded by all those wonderful people, the world became really lonely. And we now fondly look back on that time as 6 months of what we call baths, beards and booze.
Yep.
Dodgy beard, have you ever grown a dodgy beard?
Yes.
Yes.
I have an interesting scar on my face here that you can't see until I have a beard, and just there's a huge hole in it. I can't, and it takes me 6 weeks to...
And even then, your wife's probably like, "Are you growing? Are you keeping it?
Exactly what's happening here.
What's going on here?" So that was me, dodgy beard. I would put the children to bed. As I say, we just had a newborn. And then I would remove myself to the family bathroom, where a lot of people go for sanctity and quiet, and I would just hide away. No one could get me there. It was a safe space. And alcohol and I, we just became best buddies. Baths, beards and booze. And when now doing what I do, those are the classic signs of someone experiencing depression. We get the removal, the isolation, the withdrawal. We get someone not being able to look after themselves, or I've got no purpose. I can't fly a plane. So what on earth would I start? Why would I shave? Why would I iron a shirt? And then the not wanting to feel that emotional pain. So if I'm half cut, I can't
feel that anyway. Yeah.
So classic, unbeknownst to me that's what was going on. And then there are these little things in life that just happened that brought me here. And it's a really weird journey. There were lots of hurdles. I'm still, it's not very good of me trying to sell my business, but the business part I find so difficult. But when I'm doing what I do, it's an absolute game changer. When I'm in the zone. And
when you're up in front of people training,
yeah.
and you're giving this information, and you can see people receiving that information, and many of them will have been through baths, beards and booze, or whatever their own connotation of that is, and you can see these people then going, okay, so actually my mental health is something that's important, my mental health is something I need to look after. There's people out there that go for a run in the morning to keep themselves physically fit. It's the same thing with mental health, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to do certain things to exercise that mind, to keep yourself active, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And then the business side of it, running the business,
that's when you'd like people like you in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
To give me a helping hand once in a while.
Exactly. Just get somebody else to do it.
Well,
yeah. See, all the questions you ask me that I give the answers to, that's because I've asked somebody else and they've given me the answers previously.
All right.
That's the only reason, and that line goes down and down and down and down. So, okay, an unexpected journey. Tell me about schoolboy Christo. What did you? I mean, a pilot is one of those things, isn't it? Whereby if you say to a kid, "What do you want to do?" A pilot, train driver, spaceman, whatever, and obviously some people get to do that. And the same kid that said they wanted to be a pilot, a train driver, a spaceman is now an accountant or whatever it might be. But did you always want to be a pilot?
From year dot.
Oh, really?
I have this image.
Did your parents think you were saying pirate?
Yeah. He wants to be a pirate. Year dot, I was just obsessed. Anything that flew. But I just spent every waking moment trying to fly things, whether it was a brick out the window, whether it was a little green man in a parachute. I just spent with kites. The first image I have is me with a power kite, but it's actually stuck in the power lines, in the telephone wires. This is a wonderful photo of me, like still beaming, never going to get this thing back. It was just, I was obsessed. So I threatened to leave school after my GCSEs to join the Air Force, and my parents were like, not going to happen. And they were right. I went on to do a mechanical engineering degree, but whilst I was there, joined the University Air Squadron. And if you look back to the report of the reviewing officer when they interviewed me, and it said, an old Etonian with old Etonian views, our system will either make or break him. That's what it said. It was just those 4 lines. And my goodness, they were right. Those years of me training to join the Air Force has just changed my life. I met my wife, I made my best friends, I learned how to fly, and just joining the military, it was a very short period, but it was an absolute game changer.
So you joined the Royal Air Force as a training officer and a training pilot?
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
What happened?
After university, they sponsored me to go through university. Everyone thought I was cut out to be this maverick. It turns out the standard line is I was more of a goose. I've been streamed fast jet, and there was just always this element of me that didn't believe I was invincible, whereas a lot of my peers who were in the fast jet stream, genuinely, they just there was no element of them ever believing that they couldn't do that. And I think I always knew that something just didn't click, and I was always well behind the aircraft. So I went through the training system, and they just decided it's not for me. So that was that. So I resigned my commission because I just determined to fly. I became a commercial pilot.
You went from there to Flybe?
Yeah, so I went to there, converted my hours, did a lot of training, spent a lot of money doing it as well. It's very expensive. And then went straight to Flybe, and then that sort of rest is history. You go in as a first officer, as an inexperienced first officer. I quickly made it to become a captain, then a training captain, and it was wonderful.
So a lot of unexpected turns in that journey.
Yeah.
So where did you used to fly? Tell me, you're based in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Now, if I remember my Flybe correctly,
Yeah.
as East Midlands, Manchester, you fly to Bristol?
No, we didn't have Bristol. Not out of Edinburgh. We had Birmingham, Cardiff. We used to do Birmingham
Cardiff,
8 times a day.
Yeah.
Belfast City, London Heathrow, London City.
Belfast, of course, yeah.
London City, flying in there. So you had to do some specific training to go in there.
Short runway.
Short runway, and because of noise abatement procedures, it was always a relief when we landed. It was like, we made it again.
We've done it, yeah.
We've done it. Going to London City was fun. We go as far out of Edinburgh as Innsbruck, which was a good 3.5 hour slog, and then some beautiful mountainous terrain, but a really technical approach. And the last thing you want to be doing when you've been sat in the cruise for 3 hours is to do a really technical approach where you're surrounded by mountains all around you. But the variety was wonderful. And we'd pop down to Heathrow and then on to somewhere else, or into London City and then on to Brussels or onto Paris. And so there was a lot of route variety. But one thing that was so good about that regional airline job is that I was home every single night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a fairly thankless task, actually, being a commercial pilot, particularly the long haul guys.
Yeah.
And you'll have lots of friends that are ex-RAF and ex-Army Air Corps that are doing that job, and you're probably better out of it.
That's what I get asked. You're going back to it. And I'm like, the thought of getting out at silly o'clock in the morning. No thanks.
Yeah.
You're right. I miss. People say I miss flying. I miss setting the power levers up and rattling down the runway, and I miss a crosswind coming into Edinburgh on a horrible winter's night. But I don't miss the lifestyle.
You can do that anyway. Just get your private pilot's license.
Yeah, you pay me enough to do that, Matthew, and then
that's what we'll do.
We'll go and do that.
Just make sure that's your new business objective.
Yeah, I would. I'd love to do it again. Funnily enough, my mother for my 40th birthday, she bought me a flying lesson to just rub salt into the
exactly.
wound. I was like, thanks. So
I'm not entirely
thoughtful.
sure what to say
I
to
know,
that.
and it was wonderful. And I was like, oh, thanks, man, that's wonderful. So I phone up the flying club, and I speak to the chief pilot, and I'm, hi, how are you? I'm Christo. I've booked to come for a flying club. And he's like, Christo, is that you? He's like, yeah. He's like, hi, it's Darren. I was like, hi, Darren. He's like, you know, you taught me how to fly. I was like, oh, how the tables have turned.
Exactly. Brilliant.
It's wonderful.
So going back to the young Christo, he's got his kite stuck in the in the telephone. I'm glad you made sure it was a telephone line because you'd have been dead if it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got your kite stuck in the telephone lines. If you were to appear next to that young chap now, what advice would you give him? One bit of advice that you'd give to your younger self.
I'd say, and it actually comes from my dad, so it's his, and I'll steal it. Is that even when the world seems really, really dark and you don't know where to turn, all you have to do is just put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter which direction. You just have to do something. And if you can do that, and maybe it is the wrong way, and maybe you learn from that, and maybe you find out that step that way is a dead end, you just pivot and try again.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Christo. Always a pleasure to spend a bit of time with you.
My pleasure.
And thank you to everybody out there joining us on this Business Roots chat. We have more of these conversations with interesting people like Christo out on your normal podcast platform. So search us up and enjoy those. But for now, thank you, take care and goodbye.